Hi, everyone. This is week 6. We've made it. Congratulations. This is our final lunch and learn for the virtual boot camp, and we are so excited to have all of you here. Just going over a few of our logistics. We've had our weekly meetings. Hopefully you have been logging your productivity or avoiding it, but know that it's there. We're going to do a big Friday check-in at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for all of us to just kind of talk about what we've done, brag about some things. For those of us, me, who need more encouragement to say, you can do this, your goals, it is still technically summer. You've got until September 21st before it actually turns into another season. So we're going to get these writing goals during the summer. And so how we define summer is going to work for us. We're going to continue to track our productivity. You can use whatever you want to kind of help you. And then we're going to send out a final participation evaluation just to make sure. This has been a pilot for AABHE. And so to help us with scale up and to make sure that we provide the right structure for the different cohorts moving forward. Shawani and I have some other ideas on how we could better support the different cohorts, but we would also like to hear from you to make sure that that matches what our vision is for moving forward. I'm gonna pop in. I'm gonna surprise y'all on, especially Friday when I'm on cram session. I'll probably have to be here Saturday and Sunday on these virtual online just open sessions because I have got to. I can't come on Friday. Well, so that means Thursday, and it's 9 to 12 session on Friday. I've got to be in there. So at 1 p.m. I can have something positive to report. This is our last week. This is our power week, and we're going to get through this. We've gone through everything on this list except for the last topic that is highlighted. And so we are ready for Dr. Deardoff, and just excuse that slide, and I'll stop sharing and she will go.
It is good to see you all virtually. And let me, I think I need to be able to share.
I think you're still muted, but I did give you co-host the co-host role, so you should be able to share.
There we go. Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, it is good to be here. And so today we're going to talk kind of big picture. So this is improving writing productivity and efficiency, and it is thinking about this through the course of your career. So not just this summer, but how do you kind of set this up to be productive throughout your career? And so I'm going to talk kind of big picture kinds of things, the things we don't usually talk about, and we should, because it makes such a difference. So the first thing I want to talk about is that we need to have a plan and then work the plan. And so what do I mean by have a plan? You want to think about your work, I think, as a pipeline, that you're constantly putting things in, and then ideally, eventually, and at least at the very beginning, I remember I felt like I just kept putting things into my pipeline, and nothing was coming out. The beautiful thing is then things start coming out, and it is a wonderful feeling. And I still have things popping out of a pipeline, that will come up like years later that you'd put in and thought nobody cared about, and here it comes. So what does this mean with this pipeline image? It means I have multiple projects in different stages. You don't just work on one thing and then take it all the way through and then work on the next thing. You have to think about, this is what works for me. So I'm modeling one model. I'm sure there's lots of ways of doing this. But I know what my short-term projects are. I know what my long-term projects are. I have topics that I am reading on. I have topics that I'm looking for sources on. I have topics I'm keeping up on the literature. I have conference papers that are being proposed and worked on. I have conference papers being flipped for articles. I have articles that are being revised in light of comments from friends and colleagues. I have articles under review, articles with R&Rs that are being revised and resubmitted, and then others that are just waiting to come out. Now, do I always have 5 or 6 things in each of these categories? Of course not. Different phases of your career will look like different things. But if you think about your work in these segments and that you're trying to have different pieces at different segments. So right now, for myself, I am working on a book that has been put to the side because of other stuff I'm doing this summer that seemed to me more important, like this that I'm doing. But I have a book I'm working on, and I have the next book I'm going to write. I'm at the phase of my career, frankly, that I'm tired of articles. I'll still do some, but I'm mostly working on larger book projects, and I can do that. Grants, the same thing. Topics I'm thinking about, topics I'm writing on, ones I'm that are under production. And so you think about this pipeline metaphor. And so when I work with my faculty, and I'm getting ready to do my annual objectives for the year with everybody, we talk about that. So where's your pipeline? What's your pipeline looking like? Where are things in it? What are you waiting on? What are you working towards? What are the things you're thinking about in the back of your head? And then I think the other thing is, two more pieces of this. I regularly serve as a reviewer in these processes. So I try to once a year to review for external grants, NEH. I tend to do NEH and NSF are the two I tend to do, but I try to do one a year. So I keep up on what people are discussing, what they're looking for, what the method is. I find it makes me more successful, frankly, in grant writing when I've seen the other side. And then with journals, I try to review for journals about 3 times a term, but I'm on editorial boards. That helps me a lot because I'm always thinking about it from the view of the reviewer, not just my perspective. And so I find serving as a reviewer helps me. I think I talked about this before when I was applying for conferences. What made me go from getting a hit, and I was going for my nationals and regional, the big regional, I was probably hitting 20% of the time to hitting 80% of the time, was I got the opportunity to be on the team that put together the conference schedule for my subfield. Changed everything, because all of a sudden I was on the other side and realized what made a good proposal likely to end up on a panel and what didn't. All of a sudden I became a lot better at what I was doing. So, that's the kind of thing I've found most helpful. I realize the chat isn't open, so I want to make sure I can keep an eye on what people are talking about. All right. So then the other piece of this is, as I said, whatever else you're doing, you can have some research related to it. So think about your career, I find, as a web. How do things intersect? How do things fit together? How do my teaching, my service, and my research come together? Where are those common themes? And I'm going to show you what that looks like in a minute. So that's having a plan. To work the plan, I am a to-do list person. This is my summer to-do list. And as you will see, most things are not checked off. It's very depressing, but I'm optimistic. So I have my to-do list. I keep a calendar. It is a thing of beauty. It's the only thing, and the only app I think I've actually ever really paid for was my calendar app, because I can color code things. So I know where I'm spending my time and my energies. I have a 5-year plan in my head. I know what I would like to get done in any given 5-year period. I don't write it down, and I probably should, but I don't. But I have it in my head of what I'd like to get done. And then when new opportunities come up, I'm able to say, now is that advancing my 5-year plan? Or is it irrelevant to my 5-year plan? Or does it encourage me to change my 5-year plan? That this is such a cool opportunity that I'm willing, or it hits my values, the things I'm valuing, that I'm willing to do it. But I keep that in place. And then the last 2 things is I have an accountability team. I have people who will say, well, this primarily right now has been my husband, who says, who told me at one point, I've been hearing about this book for 20 years. You either need to finish it or shut up about it. Very useful. That was a very useful thing. I finished it because I realized I didn't want to shut up about it, but I needed to get it done. So accountability teams, people who will, when you meet and you go through and you tell each other what you're working on, speak the truth to you. They're important. They know you're on your side, but they also want to be accepted. Is it helpful to put your acceptance rates on your electronic dossier? I think it depends on you. If you think that's a selling point, then do. I think it's useful. Sometimes I've encouraged faculty that if they get published at a really high rated journal, it's sometimes worth to put that journal's rank, their number. If you get into a good conference that you think people won't know is an important one, you can't tell by the name. If it's the if it's the APA, APSA, if it's a national conference that everybody knows about, the American Philosophical Society, that's one thing. But if it's something that people may not know is very prestigious, that rate might be useful. The other thing I have is a celebration team. And this is really important. It is really hard to find people in academia who will celebrate with you, who will truly celebrate with you. And I think it's one of the saddest things about us as a culture is we seem to think when someone else does something great, that is somehow a cost to us in weird ways. You may have experienced this, that you share something you're so excited about, and that person either needs to feel the need to top it or to somehow rain on your parade. Don't tell those people. Figure out who's going to celebrate with you. When I became the department head of my current department, one of the first things I changed is we begin every faculty meeting with good news. Let's celebrate, because your good news is my good news. You're making my institution look good. You're making my department look good. You're making me look good, right? That's something we should all celebrate. So find those people who will celebrate with you. I just think that's so important, because there's plenty of people who will not. So find those and celebrate together. All right. Then the next thing to think about. I want to move. Okay. Sorry, I seem to have skipped some slides here. Let me go back a little bit. There we go. Go for the low-hanging fruit. But you want to also keep your eyes on the top branch. What do I mean by this? Look for those quick opportunities to score something, to do something that you've never done before, to widen your network, to maybe get a publication opportunity. So that's fine. I think when you see those low-hanging fruit, that's great. But keep your eye on the top branches. What's your big-term goal? What's your long-term goal? So be aware of that next goal and think about where your priority choices, whether they take you closer or further away from your long-term goal. If your long-term goal is completing the dissertation or thesis, that's the center, right? That's the question. Is this opportunity going to make it more likely I'm going to complete that dissertation and thesis, or less likely? If it's more likely, go for it. If it's less likely, new opportunities will come. Same way as tenure and promotion or visibility or whatever your goal is. My goal right now is intellectual joy and social purpose. It is good to get through the promotion process. And so my values now are, is this going to give me intellectual joy? Is this something I am really geeky about and excited about? Or is this going to do something that I think is important and matters? So know what your long-term goals are. Take advantage of the low-hanging fruit, but use that long-term goal to make your decisions. So for instance, if there's a new book in my field I need to read for my research and teaching, and Law and Politics Book Review contacts me and asks if I'd write a book review for it, you bet I will. It's 2 birds with 1 stone. Heck, I'll take advantage of that every day. But if it's an interesting but unrelated book, I probably won't do it. My personal rule is I try to only do 1 or 2 book reviews a year, because I take them pretty seriously, so I never do more than that. But I am going to think about how it fits in with my intellectual plans and goals. So how do you know what that long-term goal looks like? So let's say you're going for full professor, or if you're going for, we can do the exact same thing if you're going up for tenure, or if you're just going on the job market. Any of those things, you're going to do the same process. You want to pull out the requirements for what you want, the requirements for the job, the requirements for tenure, the requirements for promotion, and then get the CV of a couple of people who just achieved what you did in your field. It's not hard to get, right? But get a copy of some CVs of people who've done it, and then compare them. Pull out your CV, the CVs of other people who've done it, and the guidelines you're looking at, and see, what do you have? What do you not have? What are you missing? You want those concrete goals. Do you need 2 more articles, another successful grant, some evidence of community engagement, some teaching experience? Then you know you probably want to add a little more to be safe, but you know what you're aiming for. I just think the more concrete you have a sense of what you're heading towards, the more useful. I think most people of goodwill, and you know who they are willing to help. Outside eyes are useful. Before I went up for full, I was nervous about it for all sorts of political reasons that we all are in navigating this. So I sent my letter, my application letter, where I laid out my case and my CV, but not the documentation, to full professor friends across the university, and asked them to take a look at it and tell me. And these were people I trusted to be honest with me, because I'd been honest with them in other cases. They'd been honest with me. I knew they'd speak what they thought was truth. And I asked them to take a look at it and tell me any gaps. Should I feel confident going up this year, or is there a gap I need to fill before I go up the next year? That was really helpful. They gave me some feedback. They gave me a lot of encouragement, and it gave me the encouragement to go ahead and put myself out there and give it a shot. But I think it's useful, and people are willing to do it. We just are often afraid to ask. I also asked another person who told me she'd never vote for me because my letter was too long. What did I learn from that? Probably not the person I'm going to go to in the future. Right? Probably not helpful. Okay. So the next thing we want to talk about is conferences. This is a huge issue, I think, for a lot of people, is how do you use conferences to be useful, especially if you don't come out of a well-networked grad program. I did not come from a well-networked grad program. My faculty were never at the national conferences. They really weren't that visible. They weren't introducing me around. I had one person who helped me out, and that was about it. So I had to figure it out on my own. So that's what I'm talking about. If you don't already have your own network, how do you use conferences to build it? Recognize you're going to start small, and you're going to build your own network. And then you're going to help people behind you not struggle with the same thing. So conferences are how you're going to find collaborators. And to be honest, that's the secret of my success. I've probably had 15 to 20 research teams over the course of my career, for grants, for publishing, for everything. And I still have 2 that are like 3 that are now pretty long-standing and ongoing. So conferences are how you find collaborators, how you build a network, how you get a reputation, ideally in several subfields, and how you get opportunities. So you've got to get out of your hotel room and meet people. Now, how do you do this? I think the best thing for me was I got involved in a subfield on teaching and learning. It was interdisciplinary, cross subfields, right? But we have these in the American Political Science Association. We have what we call sections, but they're basically subfields. And there's like 40 of them. And I got involved. I did the ones that were my academic sections, but they had like 300, 500, 700 people, and they were controlled by very key gatekeepers that I wasn't part of their networks. And that was a little harder, but I attended those. But I got really involved in this little teaching and learning subfield. And at the time, there were like 8 of us, but it was 8 of some of the most important people in the discipline, which I didn't know, who wanted teaching and learning to be taken seriously. And so I met with them. I went to their working groups. I became the editor of the newsletter. I ended up being on their journal. The political science never did anything with teaching and learning, so there was no teaching and learning journal. So I was on the team of people that put that together. I ended up being the chair of that section. Then I became very involved in the new conference on teaching and learning because people knew who I was, because that was the group they went to. I mean, my career bloomed because of this opportunity. And I built networks out of that. And so this year I'm being elected one of the vice presidents of the Political Science Association, the American Political Science Association, out of teaching and learning, because I built relationships, and I'm not good at that. It's not my strength. But I was able to find people and then I had people to go to dinner with, and I go to dinner with them and they bring other people to dinner. And so we met people. Conferences can be really good that way if you see it as that's the opportunity. The next thing I do is think about balancing your research portfolios. So think about, you want single authored scholarships and grants. You do want to show what you can do. But you also want co-authorships, some of which you'll lead and some you follow. I'm really good, as you can guess, with lit reviews because I love them. I'm a great co-author because I do beautiful lit reviews and I help people think things through. And so I find a lot of times people who are more quantitative oriented need someone like me. So I'm a good partner. And research teams, some you steer and some you ride, and you do the work, but you're not steering. And so I think it's been really helpful for me to find teams of people interested in similar questions and building things together. And that's how my research keeps going, because even when I'm not working on something, somebody else is. And it's also good for accountability for me because I don't want to disappoint other people. And if I offer to do something, but then I don't get it done, I've disappointed someone else. It's one thing not to meet my internal goal. It's another thing not to meet someone else. Okay, how do we build networks when many conferences are now being conducted virtually? I think that's a great question. And one, it won't be forever. There's a reason why academics like gathering face-to-face. So remember, it won't be forever. But I would suggest, if you are in a session and someone asks a really good question that connects to something you're interested in, follow it up with an email. Ask, I'm interested in what you were talking about. I was wondering if we could have a conversation on it. The people you do work with, find out who they know. There's also a lot of networking. Most of these most of the disciplinary organizations now have internal networking tools that are using because they recognize that this is an issue. Take advantage of it. My discipline is now doing these workshops on, their teaching and learning workshops that they bring together people, I'd say 15 people from across the country to work on a project. Sign up for those. You won't get them all. You'll get turned down a lot, but you'll get some of them. Pick things you're interested in. My career changed because I did an NEH in 1997. All right, National Endowment for the Humanities did these summer institutes. I did one at Harvard at the Du Bois Institute for Afro-American Studies that I applied for. And I was young, my naivete, they said, we'll let you know, I think it was Good Friday, we'll let you know whether you're in or not. And I didn't hear anything. So I called them that following Monday and asked. Turns out they had 350 applicants. They only contacted the people who got it. I didn't hear from them because I didn't get it. But they were so surprised that someone called and asked. And I just said, well, if anybody drops out, no, I'm really excited about this and I would be really interested. Well, someone dropped out and I ended up being their alternate. Best alternate ever. I mean, that was like the best thing ever. I met 30 people, spent the summer with them, and then spent the next 20 years writing grants, doing projects, publishing with 5 of them. And sometimes I pushed, and sometimes and steered, and sometimes I just worked and ride. And that's okay. But you've got to put yourself out there and take the risks. And that's how you build the networks. I've applied to a lot of things I've been turned down for, but the few things I've gotten have been career changing. Programs like this is a classic way to build networks. Who else in here is doing work similar to yours? The next thing that works really well for me, and this is probably going to reveal more about how my brain works than anyone. Okay, let's see. If rejected, is it okay? Yes, I think it's always okay to ask. They may not feel comfortable. So the question is, if you're rejected for something, is it okay to ask how to improve upon your submission? And then how do you go about asking? If it's a grant project, you have to talk to the program director, and they will usually share with you that information. It's always worth asking. If you apply for a grant program and you don't get it, you know, you can always call and ask. They can just say, we've had a lot of really good applicants, and that can truly be the case. I mean, the one I applied for, 350 people applied for. I mean, but the odds of me getting that were like nil. I was just stupid and blundered into it, which is, I've learned, always ask. You might be the alternate. I think the other way you can do it is you could talk to someone who ends up getting it and look at their application. I think a lot of times people are uncomfortable giving hard feedback about approving your submission. So I would say if you're rejected, the big thing is apply the next time, apply the next time, apply the next time. Don't give up. Don't take personally these rejections, just stick it out. And often sticking it out has its own rewards. So the other thing I do is I really do try to work in themes. I try to think intellectually how everything I'm doing fits together, that I get the most mileage out of integration. So I'll give you one summer. I knew I was going to have to create, I had a Teaching American History grant with this group I'd met at the NIH grant. We ended up together getting a Teaching American History grant with our local public school system. And it was on integrating African American history, women's history, Native American history into the history courses. And I was going to have to do a series of presentations on gender in the law. And I knew I wanted them to be intersectional because our audience was predominantly African American. So I really wanted to look at that intersectionality. And so that became my theme. I decided I had to teach a new grad seminar, so I was going to do it on gender and law that fall. I'd been added to the textbook, to an American government textbook, as the official third author for their third edition. So I decided I would really focus on honing those gender and law portions of the chapters I was doing. I was working on a writing retreat like this at Jackson State, and I was giving workshops and things like that, but I was working on my own work. So I decided I would focus, the book I was working on had chapters that focused on gender and law, so I focused on those. The literature I read that summer focused on those themes. And then I spent the semester going up to that summer collecting materials to read. I do this every summer. I try to think about themes. This summer I'm doing law and the Constitution because I taught a class on it last semester, and I'm going to be teaching constitutional law this fall, and I'm working on a book on that topic. And so that's been what my reading has been. I've done this since college when I had my Watergate summer, and I read everything I could on Watergate because I didn't know what it was. And I realized this works. It makes you so much more productive because everything's fitting together. I retain so much more. I don't feel intellectually torn to pieces. And I think one of the things that happens, especially those of us who are at smaller institutions and who are more generalists, as I am, it is very easy to feel intellectually torn in 1,000 directions and not having expertise in anything. And by focusing my brain and working in themes and thinking about how my service can come out of these things, it makes me a lot more productive. That works for me. I know other people find other ways of doing this. The next thing I do that helps me a lot is I construct external deadlines, and I keep them. And so I have an unbreakable rule that I keep my promise on deadlines. I work really hard at it. And I will talk about there are exceptions. And why? Why do I really try to keep I try to get them external because I don't keep my promises to myself. I'm very bad about that. I'm good at keeping promises to other people. So I'm careful when I make them, but I do keep them. Why? It keeps me motivated. It is really rare And so people remember and they want to work with you again. And if you've ever had to bring, I've edited, I edited a couple symposiums and I was an editor of a book. And it is rare that people keep their promises. I'm going to have it done by X, and then you get it a month and a half later. By saying I'm going to always keep my promise, it keeps me from really thoughtlessly committing. And it gives me the justification to say no to things I don't want to do, that I have made a promise that I have to keep. And to keep that, I cannot do X, Y, Z. It's the right thing to do. It's just a good citizen thing to do. And then when I absolutely can't make it, life does happen. Emergencies happen. Health crises happen. Family incidences happen. Then let them know ahead of time. Don't feel bad about it. Just say, I've had something come up, and because you always keep your promise, people know this must be an emergency. And I will be able to deliver it by such and such. And then make sure I meet that deadline. So I may make that deadline a lot longer than I think I'm going to need, just so I make sure I hit it. And this can pay out well, I think. I was at the con law textbook team I'm currently on. They asked me to join them because on another project, I wrote a long essay on the Constitution and gender, which they had liked. But I think more importantly, when I knew it was going to be late, for reasons I couldn't control, I let them know. And then I met that second deadline. And I let them know ahead of time. So emergencies happen. Crap piles up. Plan for it. And integrate the idea that you will unexpectedly need more time in your work plan. I'm really bad. This is why I never meet my own promises, because I always assume everything's going to go perfectly. No one's going to walk into my office. I'm going to need exactly X amount of time to get something done. So build that time in and know it is sometimes better to say no than say yes and not be able to meet your obligation. I had someone who agreed to write an essay for me. This person, for a symposium we were doing, the person had a cancer diagnosis, and we both knew this and we talked about it, but he really wanted to keep working. And so he took it on. And I knew there was a chance he wouldn't be able to make it. The problem was when he couldn't meet the obligation, he was embarrassed. And so he just quit responding to my emails. If he had told me that this just was so much worse than he thought he was going to need, he just couldn't do it, that would have been fine. And I would have assigned the essay to someone else. And I would have worked with him again when he was better. Now it would be much harder to work with him because I know he won't be honest with me. And so by the time I realized that he wasn't going to, because I kept giving him more time and hoping he'd respond to my emails, that by the time I found someone to fill in the gap, it wasn't very good. And so life happens. It does happen. But be honest with people and don't string people along because you're hopeful it will get better. Just be honest and say, I'm not going to meet this deadline, but if I can get it to you at such and such date, great. Or I can't do this. It's just not going to happen. And that's okay. Just people need to know. And I think when you make these your rules and you meet them, people begin to trust you. And then they want to come back to you because they know when you can't do something, you tell them you can't do it. That's so rare that people want to partner with you. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. First of all, are there any questions in some of those things or ideas or suggestions you have for other people?
Michelle, I was going to add, one of my mentors when I was finishing my PhD said, think of your scholarship and research as an airplane, kind of like you said, there's always kind of something on the ground, there's something that's in the air, and then there's something that's about to land. So I continue to think about that for years, and I know which projects I'm just starting out, I'm just starting to read, other projects that are near completion in terms that are in the air, and then those publications that are getting ready to land. So that's been helpful for me to kind of thinking of it in that way, like you described, and having things in different areas.
And I think especially in those years before you're going up for tenure or when you're in the job market, having that mentality is really helpful. Because often when we're being evaluated, we focus on what's already been completed. And that is not a full picture of where you are, of just looking at publications. So when you have conversations with whoever is doing the evaluation, or when you're preparing your application for a job, and you can talk about not just I have these 3 publications, but I've got 2 pieces under review, I have 3 pieces under preparation, and I have 2 more plans. I have a research agenda, not just outcomes, but I have an agenda I'm working on. That's what we mean by the agenda. What are you working on and how does it fit together? It also makes you feel like you're getting more things done, frankly, which is, you need that for that internal motivation, because you've got lots of places to celebrate. The article went off. I got an R&R. It's not just the publication, right? There's lots of places to celebrate and keep your momentum going. Okay, I want to talk about the biases of decision makers and what we can do. I'm going to talk very briefly about their biases, but mostly I want to talk about how do we recognize we're going to be coming against it and how we engage with it. And there certainly are, you know, we can talk about formal discrimination and then we can talk about implicit biases, but we know whoever the decision maker is, they have a set of assumptions that we are acting with. Race, gender, sexuality, all these things make that more complex. But even if you were a straight white male with a straight white male committee, there's still going to be biases in there, because people assume what a good career looks like. And for most people, they assume a good career looks like their own. And you may have run across this. Every time I have a very young department, and when we put together search committees, I constantly remind them, we are not looking to replicate you. We already have you. We're glad to have you. I don't want another you. But we do that, right? We think a great career looks like me, or what I want to be. And how boring, how boring. So you just have to recognize we're coming up against that. How do you anticipate it and respond to that? And so with your work, as you're presenting, whether it's you're applying for a job, you're applying for a grant, whatever it is you're putting your application for, that you're presenting your career, you want to frame your own story. You want to explain and show that you've been thoughtful, you've been deliberate, and you've made choices. And you explain what it is. So you want to show that pathway of your career, just like we talked about on Lit Review. You want to walk people through it. Because if you don't, they're going to draw their own conclusions. And they're rarely going to be in your favor. Right? And I'll give you some examples in a minute. So you want to interpret your own choices. I did this because, right? You want to demonstrate, give evidence. I focused on these issues, and then give some examples of how you focused. When you leave gaps and there's any vagueness, you leave room for somebody else's interpretation. That's when their biases are going to come in. So consider a woman who cared for an aging parent for 4 years during the tenure track, or had 3 children in a very short period of time, or went through a very difficult divorce. And during those years on tenure track, productivity may have gone down for a period and then came back up. Now, if you say nothing, how might committee members interpret lower productivity or lesser service during the years? Did you use FMLA? Do you have documentation of it? Right? You have to think about those things. And I understand if you don't want to play into gender prejudices and biases, but I'm just telling you, your story will probably be a much more positive spin on than what they're going to fill in the gaps with. They will assume, well, they sent out a lot of articles and they all failed. Right? Because we don't give a lot of grace to each other in higher ed. And so you know your committee, most likely. If you're applying for a job, you don't know who's doing it. I just think you lay it out and explain. So in political science, I've spent a great deal of time working on issues of the scholarship of teaching and learning. and my research and in my service. Historically, that has not been something political science has valued, and it's been seen as women's work and therefore unimportant because it's a very male field. This is 15, 20 years ago. So I had to decide I could either make that a strength of my narrative and highlight it throughout my package, or I could ignore it. And I was afraid if I ignored it, I took the risk that members of my committee or whoever was evaluating it would think that I'd made a soft choice and it wasn't real research because it was teaching oriented. So I wanted to make it really clear to whoever was reading my package that this was a strength, that it wasn't because I was weak. And so I wanted to show how my teaching, service, and research integrated. I started that package with serendipity has been the highlight of my career. I then talked about how my department required that we begin doing assessment. And so I saw that as an opportunity to integrate my service and my research while improving my teaching. And what came out of that was X articles, these grants, these opportunities for the department, these opportunities for my students, et cetera, et cetera. So I turned it into a strength and how it benefited the university as well as me. I told my own story. I think that's important, and it's helpful to have other people look at it and read it, but I do think if you pretend these things that you think may cause problems, that I rarely think that benefits us. I think we're much better off getting ahead of whatever we think the sticking point's going to be for someone else and explain what that story will be. So how do you structure your own narrative? I mean, this could be the literal narrative of your tenure and promotion or your promotion case. That it could be the letter you're applying for your job. It could be the way you organize and structure your resume or CV when you apply to graduate school. But you want to tell the story of your career. You want to tell how the pieces fit together, why you made the choices you did, and how it connects. So use the narrative, your opening letter, the narratives for each section or whatever to make this argument. And again, if you recognize if you don't characterize and explain your choices, others will do it for you. They're going to mentally fill in the gaps. Why are you researching the topic you're working on? What did you learn from the grant writing process that increases your likelihood of success in the next? So even if you applied for something and you got turned down, but you're including that in your application because you need to show grant writing efforts, how did what you learned in the turn down increase your likelihood of success the next time? Spell it out for them. And again, focus on what matters for you. Don't just list activities, especially in CVs. Don't just list activities. You're not just knocking things off a list. You're making a case. So think about the message you're sending and how you can demonstrate that message. Don't just list all your accomplishments. If you can use teaching portfolios and research portfolios, great. Think about the letters of support that document your narrative. So if you're applying for a job, think about who's writing your letters. What are they going to say about you? What themes do you think will come up? Now, how can you enhance those themes in your letters and demonstrate them? I tell my students when they're applying to law school and they have to write a personal statement, that if they can tell me what their personal statement is about, they're willing to share it with me, then I'm willing to take my letter and make sure I hit some of those same points. So they're putting together a package. We can do the same things. When I put my package together for full promotion, I remember, because I got better at this, I didn't do this at tenure. And I went through tenure twice. I got it both times, but I did it at 2 different institutions because, yeah, it's a long story. I thought about who wrote letters, and then I asked for letters that would bolster specific points I was trying to make. So really think of these as coherent packages, your CV, the letter, the documentation, external letters, whatever you're including. Think of it as an entire narrative, and you want to frame it. Okay, so let me just show you. Is there any questions up to now? And then I want to kind of briefly just show you what I mean. So when I applied for the job I have now, they asked me to do 2 things. They wanted, and I was applying for I would come in with rank, so full professor, but department head. And they wanted me to do an administrative presentation, which are always just so much fun. And they wanted me to do a presentation of my research, but I could either do one research project or I could do a summary of my career. Well, I've done plenty of the research projects ones, but the summary of career intrigued me because I'd never really thought about it that way. And so so I started thinking about, I got out my CV and I started looking at it, and my concern was it was all over the place. I looked like a dilettante. I was doing things that typically aren't valued in universities. My research grants, I had, I think at the time, like $1 million, $1.5 million research grants, but they were all in programming, right? Not one on research. They were all external, you know, good things, but they were programming grants. I had textbooks, not monographs. I had a lot of local work and then national on issues of race and gender, which again, traditionally had not been valued in political science. Most of my published research is applied, teaching and learning, again, not really valued. I always joked, my CV at an R1, not one thing in it would probably count. So how do I show that these were actually choices I made? And there's a method and a structure behind it. And it wasn't me just randomly flitting from opportunity to opportunity, that my career was just not a collection of low-hanging fruit. Because I felt, as I looked at it and before I started writing it, I felt some shame. And then that made me mad. I shouldn't feel shame about the work I've done just because others don't value it. So I knew I needed to frame it. And so I started thinking about, what did my CV show? And this was lonely work, I have to say, because who else can you do it with? You just have to sit down and face it. And I realized three things. That one, my research reflected every aspect of Boyer's model of scholarship. And if you're familiar, Boyer says there's the scholarship of discovery, right? The scholarship of application. And then he talks about the scholarship of teaching. And I realized I had done all of those things. Most people do one. I had done all three. And I was going to an institution, to a department that was a joint blended department that was tearing itself apart because half of them did research and discovery and half did applied. And I could show how this fact, that I did all aspects of Boyer's model of scholarship, made me perfect to chair that department because I respected all kinds of research. I had experience at all kinds and been published by decent presses, good places. So that was one thing. The second thing I realized is I counted the number of collaborations that my CV demonstrated. And I was shocked. It was like 20 different collaborative groups over the course of my career. Some large and ongoing, some small and one-times. And I thought, now what does that say about me as a scholar? I had individual work too. So I wasn't writing coattails. And I was first author in some and last author in others. Some was helping junior people and some were senior people helping me. This says good things about me as a scholar, right? That I could then say, look, this shows what kind of colleague I'm going to be and how I see what the academic enterprise is about. And then the third thing was, I realized that most of my topics, though they're in law, it was in theory, it was in American politics, all these kinds of things, they all dealt with this concept of equality and what equality looks like and how equality can be manifested. And that tied not only my research, but it tied my teaching, it tied my service, it tied my professional development, it tied my international work. All the things I've been doing were connected to those notions of equality. I wasn't a dilettante. I had a broad reach, a broad grasp, a broad agenda that I'd been fulfilling for 25 years. I didn't feel shame anymore. I was really excited, kind of proud of myself and what I had done without even knowing it. I wish I had done that years ago and been more deliberate and had not been apologizing for my choices, but instead had taken ownership of them. It was such an incredible experience. I got the job. And I think in part because I came in and I didn't apologize, but showed what I had been doing and why I'd been doing it. I told my story. And then I started realizing that I could take everything I had done, everything, and put it into 3 intersectional themes. That one, how do we pursue equality and a society founded on personal liberty in a way that law both advances and detracts from that pursuit? And questions of how and what way we educate students, particularly those traditionally excluded from higher ed, towards the goal of a more inclusive democracy. That's what I've been doing. And I could say it. I was 22 years into my career before I figured this out. If you do this earlier and think about all the pieces of the puzzle, your goals, your directions, your interests, and your opportunity, you can leverage these things in really meaningful ways. I mean, I think what I could have done if I realized this earlier, the way I could have leveraged and put these things together. But more importantly, I think for us as individuals, it will challenge your own insecurities and it will resist that damned imposter syndrome we all struggle with. It will help you overcome that. I do some mentoring through the American Political Science Association. I had a young woman who I sent her my CV, she sent me hers, and we were talking, and she said to me, you know, I want to have the career you had, but in much more prestigious institutions. And I mean, think about that for a minute. Yes, that was my response to. Who says such a thing? So I just started laughing because, I mean, who says this? And I kind of said that to her. And then I said, you know, I could not have had this career in more prestigious institutions because more prestigious institutions don't care about these things in the same way and don't value them. And the reason why I was able to do them is because I was at institutions that were really excited for the things I did. They may not have always understood it or see the connections, but they backed it and they counted it and they thought it mattered. So that really made me feel actually pretty good about the choices I've made. She's at London School of Economics now, so she's in her more prestigious place, but she's never going to be able to do the things I did. She'll do different things, and that's great. But it is recognizing wherever you are, there's some real assets for being there. Figure out what those are and how they come in line with what you want to do. And make them work with each other. Don't grieve the things you don't have unless you're going to spend all your time getting to them. I spent a lot of years doubting myself. Did I make the wrong choices? I was at a teaching institution for 12 years. Every time I went to a conference, I came back and mourned the fact that I wasn't doing the things I was trained in graduate school to do. What a waste. When I finally realized that I had such cool opportunities where I was to do the things I really did care about, I dropped a lot of baggage. Higher ed, and I think grad school, convinces us there's one way to do an academic career, and it's the way usually of our R1 professors. And I'm telling you, there's wonderful, wonderful careers for us in all sorts of institutions, all kinds of institutions. You just have to make it work for you. So you've created a network here with other people who value the same things, who can hold you accountable, who will celebrate with you, and who can help you see the beauty and meaning in your own work. So take advantage of this. When you have the chance, share it with the next group of academic women, right? And academic men, those who want to see this world be a better place. And we can change the academy from the ivory or ebony tower, depending on where you work, into the collaborative public square where it can be a joy to labor and to labor with each other. So last point. So I want you to think about your academic career with a metaphor. I'm a big metaphor person. If you've been successful in school and academia, and if you're in this boot camp, you're probably a very goal-oriented person. You set goals for yourself and you achieve them. That's probably why you're here. And academics is full of goals that we have to hit. And when I was in grad school and they put up yet another hoop for me to jump through, I remember saying, set it on fire. You can't stop me, right? Go ahead, give me another hoop and set it on fire. I'm going through it. I did that through my first tenure track job, promotion, which they kindly separated for me. And I mean that sarcastically. It did not feel kind. When I went to another job where I had to go through tenure again, that I later found out was not necessary, unlike what they had told me when they hired me. Applying to another new job, going, promoting to full, applying to, all of these. I had a metaphor of a house that I went into the door, I went through the front room, and I was going from room to room to room deeper in the house. And then my thinking was when I was done, the house would be mine. A friend of mine, got full professor at a law school at the same time. And we both got depressed because we finished our goals. We were done. And now we were in a room and there were no more doors and no other place to go. What were we supposed to do? And we were talking about it and realized we had the wrong metaphor. We should have been thinking about this not as a house with rooms and doors, but a field with fences. And once you get to a full professor, the fences are gone. And now you have the latitude to frame the parameters of your own career. Had a new faculty member who just got full starting Monday or Saturday, right? Saturday, she'll be a brand new full professor on August 1st. And she came to me and said, I want to do such and such, but I know it doesn't count. And I said, well, what do you mean? Well, nobody cares. I want to do another edited book, but nobody cares about edited books. I said, well, why do you want to do it? And she said, well, it's important for all these reasons. This is why it matters. And it's going to matter to the people who read it, but nobody cares about it. And you are a full professor. Who cares what everybody else thinks? If you think it's important and you think it matters, it doesn't matter what the institution values. It doesn't matter what the discipline values. You can do now what you've demonstrated. You can do what they value. Now go do what you value. That's what we're working towards, right? That's the purpose of promotion and tenure. You show you can do the things that everybody values and you can do them well. And then you get to the point where you frame it for yourself. And that's where it gets great. So last two things. This is the quote I share with my students. When we feel stuck and we don't want to work and we feel like what we're doing doesn't matter, we realize there is no expedient to which man will not resort to avoid the real labor of thinking. I do dishes, I clean. My husband used to say he'd like to pick fights because then I would go clean the house when I was mad. When I also do the same thing when I don't want to do work. I clean my desk till it's pristine and then it's time to work. And of course, then I've killed like 6 hours. There is no expedient I will not resort to avoid the labor of real thinking. But then there's this quote that's at the front of my writing journal. And this is to boys, right? Now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. It is today that our best work can be done, and not some future day or future year. It is today we fit ourselves for the greater usefulness of tomorrow. Today is the seed time. Now are the honors of work, and tomorrow comes the harvest and the playtime. Now we do the work because we know it matters. And it's going to give us the capacity to do the things we're passionate about. And if we're wise and smart and careful, we can do these things together. And I am way out of time. I got too excited, and I have another group that started 3 minutes ago. So thank you all so much. I've really enjoyed this. It's been really great. If you have questions, Shwani and Jennifer have my email, and please feel free to send them, or I'll answer them and get them back to you, and she can promote them to you all. But I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for your time, for your weeks. that you've joined us. I've got my notes. We are harvesting now so that we can play at the end of the summer. It has been an honor to labor with you. It has been a joy and such a privilege for you to spend your time, for us to be able to spend time with you and really just learn from you. This has really been such an honor. So we will continue to tell our own story, to have our own narrative, and make sure that we're working on our career matrix, so that we can come back to you and maybe you can help us with our lit reviews in the future.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing is, and remember, we do this for the next generation, right? We can make higher ed a much better place to work and a much more joyful place to work.
And you have definitely laid the groundwork for us to know that we can be successful and grow right where we are. So thank you.
Absolutely.
We are giving you a virtual kudos. Thank you for all your time, energy, and labor these last few weeks. So again, if you have a question, we can certainly follow up with you and make sure that you have Dr. Deardoff's information.
Absolutely.
Thank you again for attending our virtual writing boot camp, and we hope to see you all on Friday at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.